Hi everybody, I want to do another video, a short video. This is video number 55 for the City and Guilds woodworking course. Actually, this is for level 3 students. One of the things that's important when working out the principles of organizing, planning and pricing construction work is the question of plant. Now the word plant, funny word really, it doesn't mean a tree or a flower. What it's referring to is items of heavy equipment. Often plant is referring to items of heavy equipment that are stationary. So that's why they're planted in a particular spot. But actually it can refer to other things. It can refer to a JCB digger. It can refer to a hydrovane, which is used for digging up the roads. It can be used to describe what happens with a crane. Okay, a crane is referred to as plant, or it could be a dumper truck. You know, there's all sorts of items of equipment. It could actually be referring to a cement mixer. That's called sometimes plant. And one of the decisions that's made quite early on in the pre-contract planning is a decision as to what to do about obtaining the items of plant that will be necessary. Now, the question will be, do we hire the plant or do we purchase the plant? You know, do we actually pay money each day for having the plant as long as we need it, or do we just buy the plant outright? And there's different points of view about this. For example, a crane would usually be hired because it would be much cheaper to hire one for, say, a day or 2 days or 3 days than it would be to actually buy one. Maybe cost, you know, £200,000 or something for a big crane. So, you know, hired plant will always be plant tested. Now, if there's small items of equipment, it could be a big drill or it could be a little cement mixer, things like that. All those sort of things can be hired. And normally speaking, when machines like that are hired, they will definitely be pat tested. And that means that they will have been inspected by an electrician in recent times, and they will also be serviced and kept in perfect working order. Hiring can be terminated pretty well when it's not required, and this saves a lot of costs. If you can imagine, you need a drill to do a particular job, but there may be many days, and maybe a week or a fortnight when you don't need that drill, so you can actually give it back to the hire company and you cease to be paying. However, when you do hire equipment, it tends to be a little bit more expensive initially, but it does save money in the long run. Now, there are no ongoing maintenance costs if you're hiring equipment, because you just pay a fee to hire it for a certain amount of time and you pay no more. Now, the repeated use of hired equipment, okay, may in the end be more expensive. I'm not quite sure what the proportion is, but I do understand that a piece of hired equipment, if it's hired for more than 6 months, then the thing is paid for itself. Okay, so the cost of the item is divided out over 6 months, and everybody pays a little bit whenever they hire it, but after 6 months it then becomes something that's been paid for. And the effect of that means that if you need some equipment to last more than 6 months, then it's then going to be cheaper for you to buy it outright in the first place. The next thing to consider is buying materials and stock systems. The program will allow the site manager or the company buyer to plan for the advanced ordering of materials depending on the size of the company. And it's a good practice during the pre-contract planning to source suppliers that can provide all the materials required for the contract. In some cases, these may be nominated suppliers. By the way, we're using the word contract quite a lot here. Strictly speaking, the word contract is a piece of paper in which two parties agree and they sign. That's a contract. However, sometimes the word is used as a verb to describe work that's being done. So we understand that the word is used in at least 2 or maybe 3 or 4 different meanings. So when you're hiring, when you're purchasing material, if you're going to purchase it on a fairly regular basis, and if you're going to enter into a good relationship with the purchaser, you might be able to get very, very good terms. You might even be able to get a discount. So this is one of the things that needs to be considered when buying materials. Now, on a site, part of the question of organization is the documentation that is available to enable things to be tracked properly. And I'm going to give you an example of that. Every single worker on the site, generally speaking, fills in a timesheet. Now, a timesheet, I could show you a picture of one, but there's no particular version that's correct. All the timesheets around the world are all a little bit different. But the main thing is that they record time. You see, operatives are paid on an hourly basis or even on a daily basis. And so a timesheet is simply a document produced by the company that the operative or the worker signs and records the hours that they worked. They may record the beginning and the end of the time that they worked, and they may record the total number of hours per day. And generally speaking, there will be a total made for the end of the week, and that will be exactly what will be claimed as paid work. So that's the first thing, a timesheet. The second thing, there's a lot of items of paperwork. The next one is what's called a job sheet. A job sheet. Now, a job sheet is a piece of paper again, which gives details of a job to be carried out. Okay, a job sheet. So sometimes it may talk about the materials required or even the hours that are suggested to complete the task. But the important thing is the job sheet is a description of the job that is being done. Okay, now the next one, we mentioned this earlier, it's called a variation order, okay, or a confirmation notice or an architect's instruction. But I'm going to stick to the variation order. You see, sometimes there are variations to the work that is required to be done. It's very possible that in the planning process, both the client and the builder may not foresee a particular thing that happens. Just recently on a build, I understand, when they were digging the foundations, they discovered a lot of water pipes. So they called in the water board, and the water board said, well, it's not our job. We're not going to pay for it. It's going to cost a lot of money to fix this, to move the pipes and stuff. So there was a bit of a dispute that occurred. Okay, now this is a classical example of a variation order that's needed. So it needs to be a description of the amount of work to be done and what it's going to cost. And the client and the builder will agree together to sign the variation order to agree that the work is to be done and the costs are to be paid. Now then, without a variation order, okay, then the client is not obliged to pay for extra work. It's not been agreed. And without a variation order, the builder is not able to just automatically claim for more wages, for more hours of work, okay, or even for more materials. So the variation order is very important, and it enables the cost of work to not be just raised at the end to make more profit or whatever it might be, or even just to cover work that extra that needed to be done. So that's the variation order. I always issue a variation order whenever I'm giving a price, a blank one, and explain its purpose, so that at the end, when there's a variation to be agreed, I don't overcharge the customer, because we've agreed it in advance, and the customer knows that there's going to be no surprises in cost. So it's one of those things that can be very positive. Now, the next thing is a requisition order. So the word requisition is a strange word. It just means a request. And so it's a request for materials of various types. And so this is filled out, and the materials are carefully written and described. And this is sent to the builder's merchant or to the supplier of goods. and usually it's authorized by the supervisor before it's sent, and then those goods duly will be sent by the supplier. When the supplies come, then there will be a delivery note. Now, a delivery note is just something that the lorry driver will bring, and it will have a list of all the things that you've requested on the requisition order. And if anything's missing or if anything's different, it's at that time when it's delivered when it really must be checked. Okay. Now, now we've got two different things here. We've got the delivery note, yes, and then we might have a summary of the delivery notes that may be delivered, a monthly delivery record, So what the builder can do then, he can see all the things that have been sent to the site over the period of the month. It's a delivery record, not just a delivery note, but a delivery record. Now, an invoice is another piece of paper. An invoice is sent by the supplier to the builder, and what it is, it's a request for the money for the things that have been sent. Okay, so you might go to the builder's merchant and you might order some bricks or you might order some wood, but the important thing is that the supplier will write out an invoice, and there may be quite a number of invoices that eventually are then paid by the company to the supplier. Another piece of documentation that's very, very, very important is that the site manager will have a site diary. So it's a diary, an ordinary diary, but a diary that has a whole page, a big page, so that he can write all the notes that he needs to write for that day on the diary. And it's his record of things that are happening on a daily basis. Everybody he meets, he writes a little note. Every problem that arises, he makes a little note. And it becomes his record, his timed record of everything that's happening. Another important piece of paperwork, we've mentioned this before, is the risk assessment. Now, the risk assessment, as you know, because you're already a level 3 student at this stage, a risk assessment is a summary of all the hazards that are perceived, and it's also a record of how the company is going to minimize or even eliminate those risks. Alongside it is another document. Okay, these are all normally a complete book, and this next book is the method statement, and the method statement is a description of everything that's going to be done on this particular site and how it's going to be done in such a way that it will be safe. That's the important thing about a method statement. Another piece of documentation that's very, very, very common is what's called a permit to work. Now, a permit to work is a documented procedure that gives authorization for certain people to carry out specific work within a certain period of time. And it sets out the precautions that are going to be required to complete the work safely. And it's based, of course, upon the risk assessment. And you may say, well, what's the particular point about the permit to work? Well, for example, if you're going to be working on a building and you're going to use a blowtorch to cut metal, then that's a flame and that could cause a fire. So that needs to have a special permit. Nobody's allowed to use anything that's called hot works unless they have a specific permit to work. Now, other people may need a permit to work to service gas. If there's any gas on site, they may need special permit to work for that. They also may need to use special permits for work for things like electrical installation. If the electrical installation is of very high voltages, there may need to be a permit to work. And lastly, there may need to be a permit to work for different times of the day or the month. Okay, so for example, a person may need a permit to work on a Saturday, when normally the building site would be quiet and silent. Or you may need to have a permit to work late in an evening. You don't expect a building site to be running at full pelt, very noisy environment, right through till 9 o'clock at night. However, once in a while, that may actually be necessary. For some reason, it may be necessary. And so there would need to be a permit to work, and that must be agreed, and all the relevant people would need to be informed that that permit for work has been in use. Well, there we are. There's a lot of paperwork involved in running a site. It's not about running the site in a pedantic way. It's about having a paper trail that enables you to be able to keep track and to plan what's happening and what's going to be happening next. Well, there we are. We look forward to catching up with you on our next installment. Have a great day, and bye for now.